Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie Tran. I've been with OC Habitat for the last 9 months for an internship, and I've learned a great deal about environmentalism, and that is something that I want to learn more about. I study urban studies, so a lot of urban planning and urban design, and so that's why today I want to talk to you guys during this coffee and conservation about cities and sustainability. So, next slide. So today, what we're going to talk about, just an overview, is just sustainable cities and examples, and then some urban design and planning principles, community action sustainability, and then we'll save questions to the end. But throughout the presentations, there's going to be like discussion points, so feel free to unmute during those discussion points. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. These are set by the UN. The reason why I want to bring these up is because these Sustainable Development Goals are a set of 17 integrated and interrelated goals to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that humanity enjoys peace and prosperity by 2030. So a lot of urban planning principles, because of these goals, focus a lot on these sustainable goals. So some of the items are clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, as well as industry, innovation, and sustainable infrastructure to continue with these goals. So when we look at a city's sustainability, researchers look at 4 key components. They look at environment, transportation, energy sources, and lifestyle and policy. So the first key component to sustainability that we're going to look at is environment. So basically, cities determine a city's sustainability by looking at, the health of the environment. If the city is doing good for the environment, recycling, reusing, and also setting amount of different initiatives to continue to help protect the planet. So the next one is transportation. So transportation is another key component to determine a city's sustainability. Obviously, cities that rely more on private automobiles, like your personal car, where roads are just very stretched out and you need a car to get from place to place, they would rank a lot lower in sustainability compared to a place that uses a lot of public transportation. A good example that we're going to talk about later is San Francisco. San Francisco, some of you guys might be familiar with the city where they have the MUNI and BART, which are basically public transportation systems that run throughout the city and the Bay Area that allow people to get from place to place without having their own vehicle. Another component to look about a city's sustainability is energy sources. So if a city relies more on factory and kind of industry energy, then obviously that's going to pollute a lot more compared to something such as recycled water, clean energy, windmills that use wind, energy sources such as that. A city's sustainability, obviously a city that focuses more on factories, they're going to pollute a lot more, and that's going to present a number of health problems, not only for the environment, but also for the people inhabiting that city. And then the fourth component that people look at is lifestyle and policy. So a city's sustainability, when we look at the policy part, is that city trying to actively initiate policies and changes that are benefiting the environment, the economy, and the communities around that city? When we talk about communities and lifestyle, there are a number of different communities in various cities. Like there are, religious communities, minority communities, income communities. There's just a whole bunch of different groups of people that come together and make one giant community under the city. And so when we want a sustainable city, we want to look at, how policy and, people's different lifestyles can adapt to a sustainable city and how their lifestyles and policies can contribute to a healthier and greener city. So I have a question for you guys. Feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. What cities do you guys think are sustainable off the top of your head?
Let's see here.
Yeah, go ahead, Jean.
So I discovered just recently that there is a city in Austin, Texas called Whispering Valley. It's being developed right now. And it is, the whole city is going to be geothermally heated and cooled, along with solar and also some efficient design, to where they're going to make every single house will be 75 to 80% efficient. So the city is being created right now, but that's the only one that I know of just off the top of my head. That's would be, like a super sustainable city. But I'm glad to know that they're thinking about it, and that they're planning this city, and that it seems to be pretty popular. In fact, I just went to the website before we started this, and apparently the houses are selling really well. So I'm glad to know that a lot of people are on board with this idea of living in a sustainable city. So that's the only one that I know of.
Oh, that's super cool. I actually didn't know about that city. I actually haven't heard a lot about it, so that's actually very cool that you bring that
It's
up.
brand new. Yeah, it's a brand new.
Yeah.
It's a brand new city. It's it's happening right now. And but yeah, the whole idea of geothermal, using that because it's kind of hard to retrofit a house for geothermal, but starting, apparently, if you start from the planning stages at the very beginning, that's where the community can really benefit from it, because they can pipe it to all of the houses, and then just have all the pumping stations sort of centrally located throughout different parts of the neighborhoods. So it was super exciting to me. I'm really glad to know that it's happening.
Yeah, that is super exciting. Does anyone want to comment on that?
I think I'd love to, that would be interesting to find out more about that, and that how does that compare to the cities that we think are already sustainable? How much better is it than what is already happening in some of the already ranked cities? I thought Portland might be one of them. I know that I've gone up to Portland a couple of times, and I've done a tour of the city, and they planned their city in a way, and I don't know that it's necessarily sustainable. It was hard to tell from the tour, but they had some really important, like you had to have a sight distance of a certain amount at every corner, so it's not blocked by signs, and you can see a certain distance. And it wasn't just about safety, it was about visual, the green and the trees and things like that. So I thought Portland might be one of them.
Did you want to say something else, Jean? Get your hand
Yes,
up.
I did.
Yeah.
One of the things that I forgot to mention, though, and Stacy, thank you for reminding me. One thing that Whispering Valley, this wonderful sustainable community, seemed to be missing was transportation. That was, I did not see any information on like bike lanes or public transportation or anything like that. And that seems to be one of the things that's missing, at least for this seemingly idyllic place. And maybe in the presentation that I watched, they just didn't show it, but that was one thing that was missing, and that's really important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's super interesting. Hopefully they'll focus a little more on transportation. It looks like from what you're telling me, that city focuses a lot on energy, which is also great, but their sustainability in regards to cities there's multiple dimensions that I think, it's hard to try to do great in every single one, and we'll see in the different cities that I talk about later. But it's nice to see that a lot of cities are trying their best to move towards a sustainable future. So, does anyone else have any other comments before I move on to the presentation? Okay, I think we'll move on to the next slide. So, according to WalletHub, WalletHub is kind of like a credible source. It's similar to TransUnion, where it's studies conducted by financial advisors. So the top green cities according to this organization and their study, top green cities in the US are San Francisco, San Diego, Irvine, Washington, San Jose, Seattle, Fremont, Sacramento, Portland, and Oakland. I actually inserted pictures. So on the left, if you see my cursor, this picture is of Portland, Oregon. You can see with the green spaces that Stacey has mentioned, you know, a lot of just vibrant, it's very visually appealing. And on the left, on the right, this is actually a picture of Irvine that I pulled from Google. This picture is one of the parks that are in Irvine, and it just shows like this huge abundance of green space, which is actually one of the reasons why Irvine is ranked so high of being a top green city in the US. So we're gonna take a deeper dive into San Francisco, which is ranked #1 in one of the most green cities in the US. So this score, these numbers are basically, the total score is a cumulative of all of the other scores and how they rank in WalletHub studies. So in an environment, for example, San Francisco actually, environment was out of 40 and San Francisco actually ranked 8. And so that is kind of like a sample of like how, for example, San Francisco ranked much higher on energy source, but much lower on environment and lifestyle and policy. And so they kind of took the average percentages of these numbers and then came up with the total score. And so San Francisco had a total score of 72.48%, which is pretty high compared to the other green cities. A fun fact about San Francisco is that it's actually ranked #4 on the lowest percent of commuters who drive and #2 on the highest bike score. And you can see that in the public transportation that will go into more detail later. So here's a video of San Francisco. Just continuing on, like you can see in this video that the roads are actually much more narrow. And so people are able to go from place to place much quicker. This is an example of how cities such as San Francisco are a lot more walkable. When you compare it to a city such as Irvine, you know, in Irvine, the roads are super wide. You can't really get anywhere around Irvine without a car. Whereas in San Francisco, you can probably go from place to place by foot or by bike, which encourages people to, you know, be actively engaged in their community and to just go out and be active in general. As you can see in this building right here as well, this is an example of a multi-use building. In urban planning, we called it a mixed-use building, where on the bottom, as you may have seen earlier, it was a 7-Eleven, and then on the top is residential use. So this mix of commercial and residential uses also encourages people to actively participate in the businesses below them, in the local economy, as well as, you know, just be closer to the resources that they need. So when we take a closer look at San Francisco is actually driven by strong policies across all categories, but specifically to waste management. So San Francisco became the first US city to require all residents and businesses to separate waste and compost material from normal trash. So in terms of recycling, this picture on the right, this is actually a poster for recycling from the San Francisco Recology organization. So there are mandates concerning composting, as in San Francisco, they had a record-breaking 77% of their municipal waste recycled due to these mandates and this strong push and this culture of just recycling and reusing. There's also actions such as, you know, using the reusable totes and compostable bags, in which there's like an initiative about these compostable bags and reusable totes that has diverted more than 1.6 million tons of waste from its landfills annually. So this is one of the reasons why San Francisco ranks so high, because there's just such a strong culture of like recycling, reusing, and just being environmentally conscious. And so alongside these initiatives, this is just another slide showing you the different parts of San Francisco. San Francisco, the city has set aggressive goals and offers, such as, you know, free low flow shower heads, faucet aerators, and rebates on toilet replacements that actually have saved the city an estimate up to 4 million gallons of water daily. So that's just an example of how San Francisco, they're actively trying to get their residents to be environmentally conscious and to try to save and conserve as much as possible. And then, as I mentioned earlier, San Francisco is very well known compared to Southern California for their public transportation. So they have things such as the BART, the Muni, cable cars, etc. This picture on top right here is a picture of the Muni. So what the Muni is basically just public transportation throughout San Francisco. These can take form in buses, rail cars, etc. As you can see here, it's just a daily part of San Francisco residents' lives, where if they want to get on a bus, they can get on a bus and they can go to X point to Y point. Another example of public transportation in San Francisco is the BART. So there's a picture that I included on the bottom right here. That is the BART. The BART is basically another public transportation system that spans across the Bay Area. So you can get from one part of the Bay Area to another part of the Bay Area. This public transportation is really useful because as some of you may know, if you've been to San Francisco, the city is very densely packed, especially within the city center. And so because there are so many people in San Francisco and the city itself is not too spread out, it's more densely packed, the public transportation just allows for multiple people to get to different locations at the same time. Whereas, you know, if you have your own vehicle, it's a lot harder to get from place to place. It's also not as efficient as well. And then a fun fact about San Francisco is that more than 43,000 Bay Area residents use a bicycle as their primary means of commuting to work every day. So, this has sound. So an example, you may have seen Irvine, California as ranked really high on one of the green cities according to that study earlier. And you might ask, you know, oh, why? And I actually was very surprised when I saw Irvine ranked so high as a green city too, because Irvine, you just don't really expect it. But the reason why Irvine is so highly ranked is because Irvine is a master plan city. So kind of similar to what Ginny was talking about with, I believe, with Spring Woods or something like that. The master plan city allows for just pre-thought out ways how the city can efficiently be spaced or used to promote sustainability and other goals that the city may have. So within Irvine specifically, in this master plan, they plan for a lot of green space, which is why Irvine is ranked so high. I feel like if you go anywhere in Irvine, you are bound to find a large piece of green space. A good example is UCI. The school of UCI is literally built around this giant park. And so that is one of the reasons why Irvine is so high. Irvine also has programs such as like the recycled water program set by the Irvine Water Ranch District, as well as, you know, there are just a multitude of biking trails and hiking trails that people use that actually lead to active communities and a lot of engagement with Irvine residents. So the next part that I want to talk about is urban design and green spaces. So kind of why urban design kind of contributes to sustainability. So urban design is defined as the making of better places for people, usually with a stronger focus on urban issues. So with urban design, a component of urban design is sensing. So how we interpret our environment is usually done through our senses, you know, like our vision, our hearing, our smell, and our touch. Because this heavily influences our psychology and thus our experience and our investment into a community. A good example is, you know, if you're walking down a street and there's a lot of trees, it's very visually appealing, as well as like you can smell like the food from bakeries, you're more enticed to keep walking or to go into the stores and participate in the local economy. And just, you know, you feel better about where you are compared to you're walking down the street, you may not feel safe. There's a lot of trash. It just smells bad. Like you are less likely to, for example, participate in public transportation or even, talk to the people who are in your community. Another dimension that is related to sensing is the social aspect. So how does the physical environment contribute to social activity? Kind of seen in Irvine, where there's a lot of public spaces that you can use, like public parks, libraries, recreational centers. These encourage active communities to go around and be outside and to be more engaged with the residents around them. And by engaging more with the community, you're going to invest more, and that gives you more internal motivation to just be better to your city and to be more green, to do things such as recycle, take care of your home, and things such as that. Another dimension that I want to talk about urban design is the morphological dimension. So what morphological means is basically the layout and configuration of urban design. The relationship between streets and buildings and open spaces, the uses for these places. An example is in this picture, you can see that there is a clear walkway that people are encouraged to walk through. And because there are street lamps, trees, kind of a buffer between the streets, people feel safer and they actually walk more. In urban planning, people talk about how cities should be a lot more walkable and things should be closer together so that people can, they walk from their house and they're like, I want to go grab some food. So they just walk down, the neighborhood and then go find what they need. And so the relationship between buildings and streets and open spaces really allows people to walk around their city and to just have a pleasant experience of their city. So the next part I want to talk about is how, in the grand scheme of things, yes, urban design does influence a lot of the sustainable city, but community action has a lot to do with sustainability as well. So a sustainable community can persist over generations, enjoying a healthy environment, a prosperous local economy, and just a vibrant civic life if the people in the community are invested and want to continue to help out the community. Examples that I put of community action are, community gardens. For example, along Santa Ana, along Bristol Street, you're going to see a lot of community gardens that serve the neighborhoods that those community gardens are in. Anyone could come and take care of these gardens, and it becomes more of like a local project between the neighborhoods there. There's also different community groups that you could participate in. There's volunteering with organizations such as OCH Habitat or even organizations of your choice. There's also accountability, just educating yourself and keeping yourself accountable. Sometimes it's a lot easier to just throw everything in the trash, but if you take the time to recycle and reuse, those little actions add up over time and make a big difference. And then the fifth thing that I put is just local businesses. So participating in small businesses and the local economy. For example, going to your local thrift shops and just not contributing to larger corporations and fast fashion when you can. And so with that being said, feel free to unmute you guys or just put it in the chat. What ways do you guys think you can help your community be more green?
I really like the idea of the community gardens. I thought that would be kind of an interesting idea to do. And then I think maybe getting local businesses to kind of move in a more green direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I was saying encourage co-op programs in the city where I think that even Irvine, and I think Irvine is well done, but some cities like that picture you showed earlier was such a cute street, right? You look down and it had a lot of quaintness to it. And I think Irvine has not done a fabulous job of that. You know, they're kind of cookie cutter looking. And I think I understand wanting to develop a city so it looks nice and clean and it's not mishmash and you have streets that are really bad and streets that aren't. But I also think that cuteness of it that makes cities destination cities, right? You know, Portland and parts of Seattle, parts of San Francisco, even down in San Diego has some really cute streets down there. And I think that, and that was kind of what Olivia was saying, is getting the stores to buy into that. And of course, obviously the stores also have to, and we're talking about whoever owns the land, right? So Irvine Company owns the land in Irvine, to have a collaboration of, you know, the landowner, the store owner, and the community to create, you know, something that is really welcoming, even if it isn't for tourists, but just the local community. I think that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there has been like movements to kind of bring cities more to kind of like that quaint nature. With Irvine specifically, it's actually difficult because Irvine was just like planned straight from like kind of scratch. I mean, based on different ideas, but cities, you know, such as the ones you've mentioned, like Los Angeles, Portland, like they have such a rich and vibrant history that a lot of movements now, when they're thinking of developing cities, they want to keep that rich history while also moving towards like a city that is kind of walkable and safe. And there definitely is like a middle ground, because those areas allow for active engagement and just like a rich cultural experience, which entices people to come back and to like invest in their community. So there is a lot of talk about that in like the urban planning world. There's a lot of debate over that, but I'm hoping that we move towards something that people just want to walk in, you know?
Yeah.
On the scores earlier that you were mentioning, you had said the overall score was based on kind of a accumulation of all the scores, but then not the smaller numbers. Were they all out of 40 when they were, or were they out of different?
Yeah, so let me go back to that slide. Okay, so environment is out of 40, so San Francisco ranked 8 out of 40. But there are a lot of different factors that go into it, such as air quality index, greenhouse gas emission, urban heat effect, green space, water quality, etc. With transportation, it's out of 25. So San Francisco actually ranks 6 out of 25, which is shocking because there's, you know, a decent amount of public transportation, but it's still not amazing. I know California especially is not great with public transportation because everything in California is just so spread out and dependent on privately owned vehicles. For energy sources, it's actually out of 20. So San Francisco ranks 16 out of 20. And basically this is based on share of electricity from renewable sources, as well as like solar installations. So energy based on like solar panels and things such as that, as well as like smart energy policies and initiatives, which is where San Francisco ranks really high, because San Francisco has a strong just overall political culture that moves towards a more progressive and sustainable future. And then the last one is lifestyle and policy. So this one is out of 15, but this one is based more on like farmers markets per capita, organic farms per capita, a lot of community gardens per capita. So lifestyle and policy is more based on like the local initiatives, such as like community gardens, farms, farmers markets, green energy, local programs. So while there is a city-wide presence, sometimes the local actions, such as like community gardens, are lacking. And you can see that because San Francisco is so densely packed. Sometimes they don't have the room to have community gardens, but there are different ways to, you know, mitigate that. So yeah, those are what the numbers stood for. Ginny, did you have a question?
Yes, I was going to say that I live in Huntington Beach, and Huntington Beach has done a really good job with having dedicated bike lanes. The streets are really wide. But I think that one of the things that they could do more of, and this is for almost every city, or not every city, but a lot of cities, that having more trees planted along the streets, and not just like the little lollipop, like the ones that only get to be like 10 feet tall and they look like a lollipop, or a palm tree, because they don't really provide a lot of shade. But if they were able to plant more big trees, or trees that will get a little bit bigger, and also the municipal landscaping, that we do have municipal landscaping and we do have trees, but it seems as though if the tree dies, it's not replanted. And a lot of the municipal landscaping ends up being just shrubs cut into squares. It's not like it doesn't seem like the plants are really like flourishing and fluffy and big and natural looking. It seems like they want to shape everything into either a rectangle or a square or a circle. And it would be nice to get maybe away from that. A lot of plants can be, they still stay nice and they have a nice shape, even though they don't have to be meticulously hedged. So I think that that's one way that my city could improve. And I know that that's really important, the trees in the municipal landscaping. A friend of mine who recently was visiting from New York, from Syracuse, she kept commenting as to how beautiful the municipal plantings were around my neighborhood and just around Southern California. And when I was thinking back, when I would visit her, it's like, yeah, they don't really have a lot of that in her neighborhood. It's just like, strip malls, malls, businesses, but no plantings around those businesses. And so even at, my local Bella Terra Mall, there's all these beautiful roses in bloom. And she just couldn't get over the fact that the businesses actually did the planting. So that's one thing that I think we live in a place that is nicely landscaped, and you don't really appreciate that until you go somewhere where it's not there. And then you realize how kind of stark and not very welcoming, it makes you feel, like you were talking about, the way that it can make you feel, that it's like you just want to get out, do your thing, and then just get back home to your little oasis, because it just doesn't feel good to be out. And whereas if I'm at, like, I'm just going to say the Bella Terra Mall, I can walk from RAI over to Whole Foods, and I can enjoy looking at beautiful rose bushes in bloom, or a tree that smells nice or looks good. And we're really fortunate living in Southern California that we have that. So I think more trees and the municipal landscaping just everywhere. But I would like to see that more in my city too.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, definitely, I agree. Like, that's actually something that I know in Orange County, Santa Ana specifically, that they're working on. I know, like, in neighborhoods in Santa Ana, such as like near downtown, they're working on planting more trees and kind of allowing for shared bike lanes. That's actually popped up in the last like 5 years. So I think we're slowly moving more towards that, but it's going to be a while for the rest of our nation to get to that.
And I know we're talking about sustainability, and this is more of a visual aspect, but I think one of the things that a lot of cities make the mistake of is allowing giant signs. That is a problem, right? It's visually not, yes, you're getting people's attention, but it's just kind of an eyesore, honestly. I hate to see it. Whenever I see a sign that's oversized, it's just really, even on the freeways, I'm like, I don't want it. It's distraction. You're driving and it's not really safe, but it's just ugly, and it would be, I like it when some cities have, I was in a city and I honestly can't remember what it was, but their signs couldn't be over a certain height. So they couldn't be above their buildings, and they had to be at eye level or something. And they could only be, 24 by 30 kind of thing. They couldn't be these giant signs. And honestly, it was great.
Yeah, Napa, California, Calistoga, and also Sedona, Arizona. Those are three that I know of just off the top of my head that have those signage restrictions. And it's true, you go in and it feels nice that you're not bombarded with information or advertising.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it comes down to like the zoning codes per cities, because I've definitely looked at some sign regulations, and it's kind of interesting how like a lot of businesses too, they try to kind of go around these regulations. But that's another way how like people can in their community, like if you don't like something about your community or maybe the zoning code, you can like bring it up, or get together and talk about it. Like it's one of those things that's like it's all around us, but sometimes we don't have these conversations. So
Yeah, I think that's probably, you were asking how can we help, and I think that is to get involved, right? Whether it's in your neighborhood, your HOA, or your city, getting, speaking up and saying, if we don't speak up, they aren't hearing us, right? The only time they hear from us is when we have a ballot vote or something. But those letters are important. I think it's important to send letters into your representatives, whether it's a local, regional or state level, to let them know, what you'd like to see changed, if there's a potential for change. So that, I think that's a big part of what could happen to make change,
mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Like I remember in high school, we had like a project where we would email our councilman members like about our potholes in high school. So that's like an example of something that you could do with like people that share the same sentiment. Yeah.
Cool.
Does anyone else have any other like comments or questions or anything?
Olivia or Nathan, you guys have anything that you want to add?
I think I'm good. I just thought it was really interesting, like the picture of the street with how you said it was like a good buffer and made more people like want to walk. I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, look at all the signs are small. I just think it's that's kind of like, that's what we all want, right? That looks amazing to me. And there's flowers and there's benches, and I don't know, I think it's cool.
Yeah, definitely. This is kind of an example of what a lot of planners and developers that want more sustainable and like vibrant communities, this is kind of what we are trying to move forward with, because this is kind of just like an example of something that people are they just feel a lot better around, and it encourages active communities.
Yeah. Nathan, I saw you come off your mic a minute ago. Did you want to say something? No? Okay. I don't think we have any more questions unless anyone wants to speak up now. I think we're done then.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you everybody for coming. I know it's a busy weekend, but appreciate you all coming out. Here again is our social media and our website. Just, if you want to get further involved with, like I mentioned earlier, volunteering. I know I plan to volunteer at OCH Habitat. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. Have a great weekend.